Hey guys and gals, I hope you're having a great day. I saw something on YouTube and it was a pastor and he was talking about our heavenly homes. And what he said was that the heavenly home was made of bricks, and the bricks are jewels, and the jewels are held together with the cement of Jesus' blood. And I thought about that. I thought, wow, that's interesting. I don't know that it's that way, but if you think about it, the Bible talks about, building and storing treasures in heaven. And, you have to ask yourself if each brick was a jewel and each jewel was a treasure in heaven that you did when you were loving the Lord and praising and worshiping, or a selfless offer to promote his gospel, to a missionary or whatever it may be, or spreading the gospel to your neighbor and sharing God's love to him. Each of those is a brick, a jewel. How many people would have houses? You know, a lot of people, they just follow the routine. They go to church once a week. They live a pretty much normal life. They come home. They go to church once a week. They live a pretty normal life. Does that build treasures in heaven? I don't know. It's a simple fact of going to church, or is it when you actually do something, selfless, and you sacrifice something? You give something to someone, a little bit of your time and attention, prayer, love, all the things that God wants us to give to other people. I would think that would build treasures in heaven. And so if you think about it, if each brick is a jewel that's earned by our own actions and it builds a house, how many people would have houses in heaven? Well, I would think if that was the case, there would be a lot of homeless people. But I'm sure the people that had a loving life of self sacrifice, who died from themselves and lived for Jesus, would share those and provide shelter to the ones that don't. Because it's a loving, caring community. So, bearing fruit is not a requirement of salvation. You're saved by grace. But we do have the capability to build treasures in heaven. And I had a dream one time that I was in this huge warehouse in heaven, and my dad and granddad were sitting at a table. And they had passed when I had the dream a few years back. And they were talking to one another, and they looked healthy and vibrant. And I was in this warehouse, and I knew that I was picking out stuff from this warehouse to supply in my heavenly home. And and this warehouse was not only my treasures that I had built up in heaven, but it was generations of family members that had built treasures up. There was just so many treasures that were built up that there was more than enough for everyone. So you could basically decorate our stock, your home in heaven with it. And that doesn't mean it's that way 100%. That was just a dream I had, but it sort of explains things kind of, and sums it up and makes some sense of it. Um, so that's something to think about. Are you building treasures in heaven? Are you living a God honoring and trying to live a righteous life? Are you trying to mirror the life of Jesus with the example that he gave us and the work he did on the cross and his sacrifice of love, mercy, and grace? Are you doing that? Will you build treasures in heaven? Will you even have a brick on the ground? Or will you have a huge mansion of treasures and bricks and a house filled with rich items that you did as you honored and loved the Lord on this earth? It makes sense. The Bible talks about treasures in heaven. And that means that some people have more treasures than others. And it's not about it's not about living a life that pleases yourself. It's about a life that serves him and loves him and wants to please him. And that's why you do works, not for salvation. And God is a loving, caring, merciful God, and he's fair and just. And a person that serves him on this earth because they love him and they want to please him would have more treasures in heaven than one that doesn't. So, anyways, guys and gals, I love you, and God bless, and happy Memorial Day.